So, hello everyone, then by means of introduction, this is Eve, I'm Tim, and we'd like to know our audience. So Eve and I were wondering what did actually bring people to the session, what attracted you? Is it the mention of the interesting topic of identity, or is it perhaps the mention of the luxury cars and the gadgety aspect about it? So if I may ask for a quick show of hands, would you consider yourself identity geek, more or less? Oh,
wow.
Quite a few. That's
Hi.
Nice. Good.
It's our people.
And what about vehicle or motor enthusiasts? Oh, you can opt into both, yeah? Fantastic.
Yeah, fair.
Brilliant. Perfect mix of people, just the right.
Any people who just like IoT stuff? Things? Oh yeah, things. Things are great. All right, awesome.
Excellent, yeah. We have some good stuff for you. So for the identity-only people, what we're going to be talking about is not limited to automotive scenarios. There's going to be a lot about cars, but what we're going to talk about actually applies to the industry as a whole. We're going to be putting identity at the center.
We have to say this. You've seen it. You've probably seen it a lot. So we want to ask kind of a very modern question. Who's in the driver's seat anymore? And, you know, more and more people are talking about no one being in the driver's seat, right? I mean, it's a little bit controversial still for people to really sign up to autonomous driving, but we have autonomous cargo ships now. We're getting autonomous trucks now. These things they're kind of in the for realsies stage. So sort of in a very real sense, we're heading to nobody being in the driver's seat, but in another sense, kind of a metaphorical sense, we've got multiple people jostling for the driver's seat because after all, a household, a family, a circle of family and friends will often share driving duties. And when you imagine a car having a digital presence, and many of us do have digitized cars in a sense, then it's possible to start applying some of the digital techniques that we use for things like access control. And it starts to get really interesting. So, for example, Tim, you could grant your daughter, how old is your daughter now?
About 11.
Okay, 11. She's not ready to drive yet, but as soon as she's starting to be ready to drive, you could grant her permissions to become a driver, maybe not with all the privileges of a full driver. You agree with that? Now, perhaps your proximity to her inside the car could actually release some of those lack of privileges, maybe give her full horsepower and range.
To drive me home.
And there you go. And then, maybe in 20 years' time, it all flips, and she's taken away your privileges.
Very likely, yeah.
It happens, doesn't it, people? So, but even if we're not all sort of using autonomous driving vehicles yet, we are using a lot of digitized decision support in our vehicles. And increasingly, we have the opportunity to make some of those decisions be about authorization. So, let's take a look at how cars have actually evolved. They've gone from, you know, in 15 years, something that's totally offline, because everything was kind of offline back then, to we now have smart cities. I have some stats for you. So in 2020, among US car buyers, 91% of new cars were connected. In 2021, we already had 237 million connected cars on the road. And in China, 9 of 10 drivers use connected car services. This is the world that we're living in. So it's a world of subscriptions to services. It's a world of, I'm almost sorry to say it, data monetization. It's an important part, but it's a fraught part. And it's also a world of software updates and software-defined features of vehicles.
And here are some visions from some actual automotive manufacturers taken straight from the websites. So Jaguar Land Rover strives for modern luxury by design and says that starting in 2025, all new vehicles will be built on a single software-defined platform. Another large international manufacturer claims it is transforming from an automotive company to a mobility company through connected intelligence services. And yet another one from the high end says on its website, automated driving, electromobility, on-demand mobility, and connectivity mobility have never been so fascinating, and automobile advancement never so exciting and promising as it is today.
I like your performance.
Wow, isn't there a recurring pattern as well?
I'm thinking of this as star mobility at this point. So let's talk a little bit about some of the risks and the challenges in this picture.
Yeah, so there's certainly new risks coming with new smart mobility. Maybe an obvious one being the security both of the physical and digital aspects. So if you look at such a connected landscape, it consists of many components, and usually, as in any large enterprise, these are owned by different business units, driven by their different agendas, different timelines, different requirements, so they're not necessarily talking to each other, right? So they're not necessarily aligned. And whilst identity is used everywhere and it spans the whole thing, reality is it's not necessarily implemented that way. And that's a problem. So what we hear from our customers, they've literally been saying, oh yeah, we're not talking to a vehicle guys. We're talking to the identity guys, obviously. And they say, well, we need to get the vehicle guys into a room. So there is no constant connection between those, and there is no common concept of identity as the foundation for this. And that creates problems. So imagine one of the application guys needs to implement a business requirement and needs some help from the vehicle guys. But the vehicle guys, in turn, they need a bit of identity to accomplish this. Without a common concept of identity, there is no way through, right? Because there is actually low linkage. There's no common understanding, no common profile of identity. And that means, in the end, you end up with compromises, you end up potentially with loopholes, you end up with information being cached by devices that shouldn't see them, you end up with more information in places where it shouldn't be. So it increases really the attack vector and the overall risk.
And we have some examples of some breaches that probably caught your eye in the news as it did ours. So one multinational car manufacturer had a breach of their marketing tools. So this was Workforce, and that enabled potentially phishing of their entire consumer population, which, as you can imagine, could lead to all kinds of issues, including digital security and physical safety issues. So that's one. That's another.
And yeah, a totally different company known and famous for its electric vehicles, and you've probably read that in the press. They had an off-by-one error in their app-driven security on the edge by giving a vehicle giving the wrong driver access to the vehicle whilst his actual car was parked next to it. And actually vice versa. So the owner of the other car only contacted that guy at some point later based on information that he found in the vehicle. So they couldn't even find out after, in whatever way, authenticating against the vehicle. So clearly some edge decision gone completely wrong.
Yet a third example, where there was single sign-on implemented incorrectly, allowed for one-time passwords to be used maliciously, and basically allowed access to all of the portals facing every population in the company. So these are obviously not limited to automotive scenarios. We see them in a lot of industries. They're particularly fraught when you're talking about a physical vehicle that could hurt somebody. So let's talk about the next risk, which I'm going to add on top of the security risk, and that risk is around privacy. So there's obviously a lot of societal and regulatory forces that are pressing on the privacy question right now. And we like to use this pyramid to illustrate what's kind of going on with modern data privacy 2.0, if you will. So what you've got on the bottom layer is data protection. Now, data protection is the phrase that Europe uses for privacy. In fact, that's kind of table stakes in a sense. It's not accidentally letting data out, if you look at what the words actually say. Now, that data can include PII, personally identifiable information. Fun fact, according to GDPR, and probably all of its cousins around the world, of which there are many, pretty much all of the data coming off of the hundreds or thousands of sensors in a connected car is personal data. And you can check out mycarmydata.eu if you don't believe me. That can go for oil levels and tire pressure and everything else. It counts as personal data because the car has a registered owner. So you see zero trust there on that data protection level because it's a concept that resonates most heavily with that privacy concept. There's two other levels to privacy that really start to diverge from the security question. And that next one up is data transparency, which is simply what you tell your customers that you want to know about them and how you can tell them that you do know things about them. And then the very tippy top, the pinnacle, is data control, which is where you're giving people those control and choice options so that you're not just telling them something they can't do anything about.
Yeah, and just to give you some more examples for data generated by that vehicle, which by definition is PII, right? The Future of Privacy Forum, fpf.org, they've got a fantastic infographic on this. So there's stuff like the CAN bus that interconnects the different microcontrollers in the vehicle. There's a telematics control unit that controls the communication going in and out of the vehicle. Event data generators for autonomous driving, or perhaps feeding back information to your insurance, which wants to monitor your driving style. There's black boxes for capturing operational data, fleet monitoring devices, so on and so forth, and something like smartphone connector software, with a little media panel in the device. And the destinations of this data, so it flows everywhere, essentially. The manufacturer, the dealer, repair shops, third-party services, like those insurances that want access to your driving performance, navigation providers, and third parties to whom the data is actually outright sold. And going back to that smartphone connector software. Who's never experienced this, that you take out a rental car and you want to pair your phone with a unit in there because you want to take a phone call, and you go, oh yeah, you're already moving, perhaps you're in a rush, and you go pair, yeah, confirm, yeah, oops, and you've just confirmed that you want to share all your contacts with that unit within the car. Right? It happened to me just recently. And in fact, very often when I take out a rental car, there's already some contact data preloaded. How get it off there? There's no way of doing that. In fact, on my way to the airport coming out here, the vehicle, I had a rental car, and it insisted on talking Spanish to me, and it had the entire history of my predecessor as a driver. So I knew I could see all the waypoint, and I could see where they were actually coming from.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yikes. So if you combine that with data that we know about, 82% of people are concerned about what companies are doing with their data. You have a recipe for not just security problems, not just compliance problems, you have a trustworthiness problem. And honestly, if I think about, I don't know, modern luxury by design, I kind of feel like luxury should also include trustworthiness. So we're going to add one more set of risks and challenges to this picture.
Yeah, talking about luxury, it's experience. Experience is extremely important, certainly from a business perspective. So I'm working with very many different car manufacturers, and they're all obsessed about getting the experience for their consumers right. And whilst the physical experience kind of comes easy to them because that's built upon years and years and years of engineering tradition, the digital experience is really hard, because that's more of a level playing field, right? It hasn't been around for so long, and nobody's off to a head start, and they're all struggling a little bit with getting it into place. So there's a lot of pressure, with the coming out from the internet, from the business, lots of innovation out there that they need to keep up with, and not necessarily a recipe to solve that. And that leads to pressure, which potentially leads to security compromises. So here's a real-life example. So think about access of a user within the vehicle authentication. You need to build some fault tolerance into this because the vehicle might not always be connected, some requests for refresh of tokens might time out, etc. So you can build tolerance into that. There's things like refresh tokens and refresh token grace periods. However, physics have it that sometimes those requests get delayed even further, something you absolutely can't predict. So 10, 20 minutes, and then they arrive out of order. So the vehicle makes a decision based upon a timed out token, and you lose access anyway. It's corner cases, but imagine those lead to around hundreds of complaints from your global user base per week. What do? You live with the complaints, or do you call potentially tens of thousands of vehicles back for a software update? Because of course it's always the legacy that's the problem, right? Or do you perhaps consider relaxing your token expiry policies?
Token time to live is a strategy that is honored more in the breach, isn't it? No pun intended. So we want to present you with our hypothesis. We put it to you that putting identity at the center of this connected world, services and devices, actually improves your security systems, and it improves business logic that can be for the top line of your business as well.
And we'll prove that using a real luxury car. Small one, all right.
All right, so we may have enticed people here with a demo, so we got to get to the demo. We might as well go get a car ordered. So in the modern era,
Steve, can we switch to the demo, please?
Yeah.
Or we'll make this one for one more minute? All right.
That's fine. In the modern era, car sales have gone digital. They act just like retail e-commerce. And so with our work with all of these automotive OEMs, we're seeing that it goes from a digital experience a putative car to a physical car eventually, so that eventually somebody can take delivery. And we will give an opportunity for a little bit of Q&A. We'll have sort of 2 demo components here. We want to give you a chance for any questions to clarify after each.
All right, so it all starts with us finding out who we actually are. And I like to have a bit of randomness here to keep it interesting for myself. So I'm using randomuser.me to define the user of the day. And it's Johan Nielsen. So he's going to be our demo user.
Love Johan.
And Johan's been interested in this fantastic Cheetah sports car. Now, side note, I thought I was making all of these brands up. It wasn't until yesterday that I found out there is actually a Cheetah sports car that existed in the 60s. Some of you might know, I didn't. And here it is. So that's the real Cheetah. Only 21 of those were made, and it was an all-American car built by Americans with all-American components. But it lasted only for 21 editions. So no connection, no intended connection to this, right? So that's the one Cheetah. The Cheetah that we're talking about, that Johan is shopping for, is actually this Cheetah. I need to adjust the screen a little bit. Right, so Johan's been browsing around. As said, you no longer walk into a dealership. You configure your own car. You've got all the options available. You don't need to select from what's already there. You configure the exterior, the interior. You add your options. You end up with a custom configuration and with a price. By the way, that's the second thing that's made up. That's not Bitcoins. That would be ridiculous. But it's Bullock, which is an ancient Klingon currency, isn't it?
Yeah, we went with the Klingon flag for our little veil here, so let's just say it's an ancient Klingon currency.
All right. So vehicle is configured, and not so long ago, you would have had to actually take this configuration to a retailer to get it actioned, or even print it out and take it there, right? Nowadays, as they're switching to a digital sales model, you can do this online. So we go and proceed and buy this, put down a block 150 deposit, and get our order going. So let's click on that. We're about to enter a contractual relationship with Cheetah Cars, so obviously they need to understand who we are. We need to register with them. So here's a Johan Nielsen. We enter our email address. Typical thing, verification of email. So Johan needs to show that he's actually in possession of the email account. Now there's a real email going out, but it all ends up in my little demo mailbox here. So this is a catch-all mailbox that receives all the mail that we're sending during this demo. But here's our real registration email. It says My Cheetah registration. Please confirm here to confirm your email address. We click on that, and the journey continues. System's clever enough to get our name from the email that we provided, so that's fine. And next thing, Cheetah recommends passwordless authentication using FIDO WebAuthn. So do we, actually.
Yeah, so is anybody here not familiar with FIDO, FIDO2? Yeah, it's pretty popular at this conference, and for good reason. Obviously, Fast Identity Online Alliance, which is really innovated around standards that take us far beyond the oath OTP days, and with the magic of a client-minted key pair for each service that you're interacting with, can do some pretty neat tricks, including in the modern era, passkeys so that you can roam across all the devices that know you're the same you.
And that's very useful in particular for a demo. So yes, we want that, please. We continue with WebAuthn enrollment, and very nice and easy. We can use the biometric authentication device on my laptop here, and we're all done. Next step, though, there's an option to register for push messages. This gives us an additional level of security because it gives the vehicle the ability, when we authenticate, to reach out back to the customer and basically challenge them for a verification.
Yeah, so this might be a tougher question here. Is anybody familiar with the CIBA standard in the identity world? Client-initiated back-channel authentication. If you present yourself to a service provider like this, or it could be a customer service rep or a teller physically in a bank, similar, they want a way out of band to authenticate you. And so the CIBA standard is nice for that. And that's what we've used here. We love standards.
Yeah, not sure we're going to have the time to actually demo it, but let's go for it. So it's equally nice and easy. We want to register for push. It presents us with a QR code. So here's our mobile phone. And we need a little authenticator app. Add an account here. Scan QR code. Go back to this. Right, and you'll see On the phone, it's been registered, and the step is completed. Now, next thing, well, we are actually to buy a deposit, pay some earnest money of 150 bulak. We're not going to do a real payment, obviously, but we can use the push authentication channel to send a challenge to the mobile device.
And I'm sure many of you are familiar with embedded finance as it works today. It's much like this experience.
There you go. You can see it on the left there as well. So we just confirm that we want to make the payment. And we're done. Nice and easy. Order has been placed, account was set up, and it says we've sent you a digital key via email. That sounds fantastic. Not only have we ordered a car, we've already got a key. So let's proceed to the portal and see what we've got. So this is our view, our Cheetah management portal. We can create families, add members. Most interestingly, though, we want to see what happened here with our vehicle. And there it is. So you can see that whilst the vehicle has only just been started getting produced, or not even planned to get produced, we've got a digital identity for the vehicle, which allows us to configure its options. We can even already assign resources to someone else, if there were any, even before the vehicle physically exists.
And so what we mean by that, we're protecting resources so that we can actually do authorization and access control over them. So you can think of a resource as basically a car feature.
All right, so let's say we want to update the property here. Great. There's others we can't update, like, for example, the production status. Also worth noting, there are no resources yet. So we've configured some options, but none are available yet, and that's because, well, the vehicle hasn't been produced yet, and things might change, right? So this is not Star Trek, we don't have replicators, so it might not look exactly like we've ordered it. Therefore, it's important that the vehicle, when it eventually becomes live, comes live, registers, advertises its resources.
And so the concept of protecting resources is actually reified in a particular standard called User Managed Access, or UMA. So it has some protocol steps where you can actually register what needs to be protected. Otherwise, you, the application, would have to be responsible for it.
Now, there was this thing about the digital car key. So checking our email, there it is. Fantastic. So we've got a key to access our vehicle, which doesn't yet exist. So when we click on this, what we see is a pass that we can add to our wallet. Can't do this on the laptop, so I'll continue this step on my mobile phone to actually add it to my wallet. So we access our, oh sorry, I need to switch to the phone. There it is. So I can access my mail catcher from here as well. There's my email, tap on that. And obviously we need to authenticate because we haven't accessed the system from this device yet. It finds us thanks to the link. And that's the beauty of WebAuthn. We don't need to do anything, right? Our passkey has roamed from the laptop to this device because it was actually stored in iCloud. So we authenticate with our local biometrics, and we're in. Great. And here's our pass. And as you can see, the description that we updated has already made its way to the pass, so there's a two-way communication going on here. So we want to add that for later use when the vehicle has eventually been produced. So now, there it is in our wallet, and we can use it once the car is ready. Now, talking about the readiness of the car, this is still somewhere in pre-production status. So in real life, what manufacturers want is give the user a real-time update on the production of the vehicle. So we would have the production line, the OT in there, sending messages to business systems, informing them about the status of the vehicle. I want to simulate that using REST calls, right? This is what these systems would typically do. So let me just quickly get the name of the vehicle so that we can search for it. We get an access token to access our identity system. We want to retrieve the vehicle by entering the name here. And there it is, that's Johan's car, and let's update the status. So I've got a pre-configured update here, being assembled, yeah, that makes sense. And
it sort of supports my contention that, I mean, a car is like a rolling API at this point, and you really need good API protection.
And as you can see, the update has found its way to the pass. So let's go for the final step and complete the build of the car and assign it a vehicle identification number, VIN. There you go.
Ooh.
We're done.
Does that mean?
That means I think we're ready for delivery.
Ah, can I unveil?
Please do.
All right. It exists, folks.
There's our cheetah. Isn't it fantastic? So, oops. What do I need to do, Eve? I just touch in with my pass here?
Yeah, that's all you have to do these days.
Okay, brilliant. So then let me use this pass and hold it against the phone, the vehicle.
Hold near reader, it says.
Right, so what has happened? As said, the vehicle hadn't registered any resources yet because it didn't exist. So the first step is actually completing the pairing, so to speak, with the user by publishing its resources.
Uh-huh.
So here you go. So the stuff we've configured and additional out-of-the-box options have now been advertised by the vehicle, and we can start using them. So the final step is indeed for me to touch in and drive away. Ah, fantastic sound.
Nice car. Well done. So, Steve, if you can give us our slides back. Thank you.
And meanwhile, let me just use a user who's not entitled to shut down the car again. Oh.
Bye, car. Shut down. All right. So what we saw here, let's build out these steps, is we went from kind of a digital reality to a physical twin. And the physical twin is tracking the reality, in some cases, of what the software says to do. So there's a lot of identities in this picture, right? We had an owner. We actually had a representative of the manufacturer. We have the car itself. I just wonder if there's any questions. Maybe we could take one question at this point if there's anything. Nothing. OK, great. We can continue.
Right, so we talked already about the different components involved here. The vehicle, the microcosm inside the vehicle, different networks, different components, pieces of software talking to each other, cloud services it's delivering data to, the people accessing it, and, well, smart infrastructure, like smart cities, charging stations, etc. And what we showed you in this example, we used relationships to actually model the access control between those components.
Right. So I think it's time maybe for another demonstration. Yeah. All right. See what we did here? Families are stronger together with car sharing. So there's multiple humans in the world. We started by asking who's in the driver's seat, and sometimes you need multiple people in sequence. And you know, there was a time when you'd toss your physical metal keys to your kid and say, have fun, be safe. We can do better than that when we have a digital presence in the world. So the owner of the car can actually apply access controls. And we want to demonstrate how these safeguards would work and a little bit of the behind-the-scenes view. So in that spirit, Tim, I love your new sports car. Would you be willing to lend it to me for a spin?
Oh, of course, Eve.
We're like family.
Or should I really? I mean, you've used powerful cars before, right? Okay. All right, so why don't we... Steve, can you switch back to the demo, please? Right, so what I'll do is I create a family as a container. So this is Johann's family. And I invite you, Eve, as a member to my family. There you go, Eve, the mailer at, we go for example. Oh.
Fantastic.
There you go, so your invitation is on its way. If you want to follow this on your mobile, what Eve will see is that I can show it to some extent on the screen here because we have this shared mailbox.
Right, you have it on the screen there. Yes, so I've received an invitation. So I've got it. It's a little small here, and we don't want to take the risk of disconnecting that mobile and putting this one on. So I'm going to open that email, and you can hopefully see by the color that I've gotten an invitation. And I'm going to confirm my email address, just as we saw before, only I'm a totally different person from Johann over there. And I'm going to complete my details, and it already knows. And I definitely want to continue with WebAuthn passwordless. 10 years ago, I was a skeptic about passwordless, and I am so sold right now when I get to go like that. And continue to save a passkey and do local biometric authentication. I feel much better about that. Great. So I'm going to proceed to my Cheetah portal. And you can follow along with me on this. I can't remember if you're showing what I'm showing, but I'm going to go to that thing where it says vehicles that we showed you before. Johan has a vehicle that he's the owner of. When I go there, even though we've been shared to basically family status, no vehicles found. And this sadly demonstrates the difference between identification and authentication versus authorization. So may I please have some rights?
You're a member of my family, but you don't have a relationship with the vehicle. Maybe I have second thoughts, but you know what? There is this guest driver role that comes perhaps with limited access to the vehicle. So why don't I give you that, and then we see how it goes?
So partial, fine-grained, annoying, not as much trust as I'd like, but that's okay. All right. So
check your email again. There should be a digital car key for you.
All right, let's check it out.
Here it is on my screen. So again, I can show it to some extent.
I'm going to go to my mailbox, and I see that I have received, slowly, your digital car key, this time in a world where this car exists. So my car key is here, and just as before, I get something that is a pass that I can add to my wallet, and I'm going to literally add it to my wallet, and I've done so. So should I try it?
Please go.
All right. Picking that thing from my wallet. Turns on. Okay.
There you go. The driver role has given you permissions. Now, is that all you wanted?
It doesn't seem like it's going very fast.
All right.
Can we do something about that?
Well, maybe the guest driver wasn't good enough, yeah. All right, I'll give you the full horsepower, okay? So I'm going to do that by creating a direct relationship between this resource, a feature of the vehicle, with the user. So I'm adding Eve as an assignee to the resource. There you go. So if you would like to try again.
All right, let's see. Full horsepower, yay! Awesome. Very pleased with that. Thank you, Tim. Johan.
We may want to skip the product manager piece in the interest of time.
All right, so that means we move along and go back to slides. Steve, would you please switch back? Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so we've just had the opportunity to see how real-world human relationships can translate into this world of digital identities and the relationships between them, including with things. This is a lot like enterprise access control, but it's kind of peer-to-peer. It's certainly person-to-person, so it needs to have some of those aspects of kind of consumer scale. Any questions we can answer at this point before moving along? Yeah, one question. Fantastic.
So, what is localized to the car from an authentication perspective? Are you having unique credentials between your guest and the original one, or is it just actually?
So the question, just to repeat, since it's not on the mic, is basically what's local and kind of what could survive lack of connectivity, is basically, and what does the car really know, and how many people are really involved in the interaction with the car?
Yeah, so what the car does, when it receives an ID through the pass, it talks to the identity platform to find out, is that ID related to me? What it gets back is actually an assertion. It could be a signed jot or some piece of information that can be stored and kept for a while, which has an expiry attached to it, right? So this way we can make the information available when offline. But that's what it does. So it doesn't actually inquire about the user. It finds out, does this ID, is it related to me? And does it have a relationship that means I should actually open up resources for this ID?
So it's kind of a separation of concerns. Okay. Thank you for the question. All right, so what does the world without this kind of unified view of identities and relationships look like?
Yeah, this is kind of the traditional picture, right? So you go somewhere, you order a car, you walk into the dealership, the car's delivered, you take possession of it, then you get a key, and then perhaps you start signing up to digital services offered by the provider. And only then identities are getting created. So now that means identity is added fairly late to the picture. What happens all along the way? So there's applications involved that in some way interact with identity or need to interact when we come to T5. But they don't have any concept of identity, right? So they have to basically do their own thing. And that's again what happens in reality, right? Vehicle guys not talking to identity guys, because there is no identity really at that stage of the life cycle.
Yeah, and true story for me that I bet a lot of you have experienced if you have at least a 2-driver household with one of these connected cars. We saw by the numbers, there's a lot of them. In addition to having the complexities of having the third-party services, like connected with, for example, Apple CarPlay, you have the vehicle itself not really being sure who's sitting right there with devices and digital keys that are special purpose that could really identify them strongly and even authenticate them strongly. So my husband and I both have seat settings. Admittedly, we have color settings too around the lights. And 10% of the time, our very lovely connected car gets it wrong. And that's not only awkward, it can put you in a bad driving position, it can distract you as well when you're trying to do something else, like actually command the vehicle. It's silly.
And that's what happens when identity is bolted on at the very end, rather being at the root of things.
Yeah, actually, I have another story, maybe not somebody else's experience, and I hope not, but it shows a different side of the coin. I was taking a 10-hour drive with my husband, I was the passenger. We realized that our 3-month trial subscription to traffic data had expired. And we really, really wanted to re-sign up. We were highly motivated in that moment to say, shut up and take my money. We tried. We actually succeeded, but it took like 3 times of failing to log in while we're in the vehicle. And it also involved a call to customer service. And the data didn't get turned back on until 24 hours later, too late for our purposes. Missed opportunity, possibly also a safety thing. All right.
So let's look at what things look like based on what we demoed. So you see that the picture is entirely different. You see these relationships going between those identities, and you see them created at different points in time. It starts with the very identity, right? And that means you can build your security posture gradually over time. As soon as an identity is added to the ecosystem, you can start formulating relationships and attaching authorization decisions with it. So that at the time when the vehicle becomes ready, you basically take the digital equipment and resynchronize it with the physical vehicle. And you've built the posture over time rather than needing to have everything in place in one go at the very end. So here the vehicle was produced at time X. In the demo, it was actually somewhere between 1 and 2. And it doesn't matter where. So these identities can enter that ecosystem at any point in time. So that's the consequence of having identity at the root. You've got a shared context that's understood by all components.
Right, so let's just summarize the kinds of requirements that the different parties have, the kind of outcomes that they seek. So if you're a consumer, it's no longer just, does it go fast enough and does it have enough room for my kids and all their sports equipment? People are pulling digital transformation really out of these companies by what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And so that includes things like trustworthiness and safety of a lot of different kinds. It includes the sharing that we showed. It includes a lot of personalization and customization that they want to be persistent over time when they're in the driver's seat. They also have concerns about all that data and where it's going. And interestingly, in the modern era, we have that element of payment with embedded finance. It's really getting to the point where you want it to be as seamless. I was just on a cruise ship and they managed to make the whole thing like a retail e-commerce experience, and I bought a lot more therefore. So I'm willing to pay the money if they can figure out how to make it seamless. Manufacturers have kind of a complementary view on what needs to be achieved. So we already saw some elements of supply chain telemetry that can be infused with identity for benefit to all of the sides. And we saw how it's important to have a kind of comprehensive view of security going all the way from these devices all the way up to the cloud when the cloud is available. So it really is like API security with a little extra frisson of danger. And of course, the manufacturer is concerned about storing consents and preferences and permissions and respecting them. And that looks an awful lot like authorization policy. And finally, you have the outcomes that all of the satellite parties to the manufacturer are really striving for. And those include dealers, who are kind of a special partner, but also a lot of more distant third parties. And so, I mean, they can range from kind of mom and pop shop level, certainly in the supply chain, like specialty manufacturers of parts, to the major streaming services that want to tell you, how it's going to be in the music cloud and the navigation cloud and so on. So the idea is that you're really going to want to have a least privileged view of all of that data in the ecosystem that's just for you, because it lowers your liability.
Okay, so back to a technical view of things. What does an architecture need to look like that delivers on these requirements? So this is something that literally underpins the demo that we saw. So first you need some storage for your identities, your user profiles, related artifacts like the relationships itself, and of course identities of other things involved. That's the directory services. Then you need something that creates the identities, manages their properties, provides feeds to other components, and takes inbound feeds. That's the identity management piece. It's also responsible for registration and onboarding, and that is a crucial piece, right? So authentication, yes, it's kind of important to get it right, but that's the easy piece, right? Authentication, that's where we have lots of standards. Registration is where you can get it badly wrong, and that's what happens in reality, right? So you can turn off your users completely by having a bad registration experience, or you can create problems for yourself because you start off with the wrong security profile or identity profile. And true story, so a major airline, international airline based in Germany, they've just asked their entire global user base for the second time in about 5 to 6 years to re-register their identities. So sign up for a new identity scheme. At that time it was with this single identity, now it's this single identity. Why? They even allow you to reuse the same email address. They allow you to use your loyalty card number as a fallback. So what kind of mess are they in? But they clearly seem to have gotten something wrong with the definition of their identity at registration time. Then there's access management. That's where FIDO, CIBA, et cetera, is executed and orchestrated. And you've got gateways to communicate between systems, particularly important in the IoT landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. And what this picture makes me think of is anybody who's seen NIST 800-207, which is the zero trust architecture, might be going, well, that is very similar. This is exactly aligned with a zero trust architecture that has policy decision making able to be separated from policy enforcement. It's particularly important where the connected world includes things as well as services. So let's just build out some of the detail on this picture. I know there's a lot going on here. Because we had identities bound together by relationships, that's why actually the vehicle could, in response to the question we were explaining, could rely on the driver to come with an identity, and it could go request details about itself and just focus on what it knows and what it's responsible for. Because we used all these great standards for identity federation, for strong authentication that are up to the minute, we avoided the digital key problem that apparently this manufacturer had, where it was like, well, oops, it kind of looks like the same vehicle. Like, how did that even happen? These things are possible to solve. By the way, at the last minute, we had changed something in this demonstration. It was going to use kind of a device pairing mode. And then we thought, well, it's so easy to actually add standards-based strong auth with an association that we might as well do it, and we're happy we did, because I think it makes our case for us, frankly. One of the things that pairs nicely, to use pairing in a totally different sense, with all of the things that we're talking about here is actually artificial intelligence, so that you can do intelligent decisioning, particularly as you can observe silently when these interactions are going on, because the context tells you a lot, and you can do a lot of dynamic adaptive controls using technology like that. We actually, around our company, call it self-driving identity for provisioning and for access control and authentication. Doesn't have to be self-driving, it can just give you recommendations though. All right, so we'd like to wrap things up here with some advice. Everything we're talking about applies to, it applies to cars. It actually also applies to washing machines. It applies to operational technology, and it applies to retail e-commerce. We actually haven't come up with a situation where it doesn't apply yet, come to think of it. So we recommend that next week you actually map your ecosystem as we've been sort of illustrating it, the different parties, the different entities, just at a high level. And then, once you've done that, you can start to identify, I think of it as the identity jobs to be done. If you're not familiar with the jobs to be done framework that's used in product management, where you get to the root of what is really important, and I'll say a little bit more about this in just a moment. So that's next week. What about in a little few more months' time?
Yeah, this should give you lots of insights to start actually mapping out your user interactions. So the different actors in the ecosystems that we've seen a few of, what are their security requirements, what are their privacy requirements, and what's the experience that's needed, and where are potential gaps. So you start mapping these out, and that will naturally take you to the place where you need to describe their identity profile. So what information is required to enable those flows, what is enough, what is too much, what is too little. And then finally, you can start drawing relationships between those that serve as the basis for authorization decisions later on. And maybe then even you want to go the extra mile and start looking into how you can further qualify your relationships, because they're not flat, right? They've got properties, and maybe you've seen that during the demo, you can add constraints and options like expiry times to those relationships.
So a little bit more about that identity jobs to be done. I realize this is a little small on this screen. Nobody wakes up and says, I think I'll log in today because it's so much fun. And nobody in IT says, I think I'll go fight for identity budget because it's so much fun. It's there for a reason. And I know some people talk about identity as plumbing, and I just hate that. I'm starting to think of it as the cardiovascular system of the connected world. And when you start to dig into why do you want identity? Why did anybody come up with this solution for what problems? There's so many things. So protection and personalization are my little alliterative way of saying security and experience. These are the twin foundations of modern digital identity. And what's interesting is there's a lot in the intersection of protection and personalization, achieving privacy, community, trade, trust. Payment, I've made it an alliterative word, it's really standing for all transaction value flowing. And that is so important, whether it's loyalty points or Bullock or real money or real crypto or something. Payment and identity have always been sort of mutually fundamental. In fact, it's why we call our profile an account. And then people is there because people are acting proactively on their own behalf to do things like sharing with other people. These are multi-human scenarios, and these were not really originally contemplated in so much of the infrastructure of IT. But these are gaining in importance, particularly as those societal and regulatory forces that I mentioned are coming to the fore. So that's the jobs to be done framework. So with that, I kind of want to say,
well, I hope that we've been able to somewhat prove our hypothesis, so that by putting identity at the center, you can create your least privileged access ecosystem for every service involved, and allowing you to make secure access decisions in your physical and digital connected ecosystem. You can use relationships based on that as abstractions for authorization policy. You can give your end users control over their personal data. And, well, you can also create payment mechanisms that flow into this in a very natural fashion.
Absolutely. So we really want to thank you for your time and attention today. We hope you'll reach out if you want to talk about this stuff more. Afterwards, if you want to come up and play with the car, there's demo stuff we didn't show. You can take your picture with it if you want. We have a few minutes because it's the last session of the day. And we'll entertain any other questions that people might have. Just remember to go to the mics. Yeah.
So two things, both along the same line. There was an announcement, Ford thought better of it after they did it, I think, where they announced that they were toying with the idea of self-repossessing cars, right? And so I'll ask you what you think about that, but I'll give you the other question at the same time. How do we prevent, or how do we ensure that the people who pay a lot of money to become the owners of these cars, now that they're all connected, are actually functionally the owners of the cars when someone else controls all the data that makes the car do whatever the car is going to do when they want it to do it.
Yeah, it's very akin to going from owning a piece of equipment to licensing some rights and not getting enough rights to really have control over it. There's some legislation in the offing about this to sort of make, like right to repair is an example of this sort of thing. There's also a little bit of a balancing act or a conundrum where if you think about GDPR right to be forgotten, in order to be forgotten, in order for you to be forgotten, the service has to actually know you well enough to then comprehensively forget you. So identity can help. It has to be implemented in a respectful way. There's a saying actually in the UMA community, I was the founder of UMA, the user managed access standard I mentioned, that we know that privacy is not secrecy, not sharing anything. We know that it's not encryption. It is context, control, choice, and respect. And we see with things like the third-party cookies, uncertain future and actually kind of dying before they've even been killed off, that there is a move towards this more respectful way of maybe even doing data brokerage.
Well, I think the third-party cookie thing is a good example where, because back in 1989, 1990, I participated in some of the original trials with the University of New York at Utica on trying to figure out how cookies work. And I actually put very crude cookie programs on my computer and did all that stuff. So I helped.
And they've never left since.
I helped them come into being, but they haven't been respectful, right? And my concern along that point would be if the people who manage the data that's necessary to make all of this work together aren't respectful, how do we get our car back?
I think it might have become clearer if had we had time for this other part of the demo, because in that part we'd have an employee of Cheetah Cars sign in and provision a service, and they don't have a complete view of everything, right? So they have a limited view, and that view is also based on data being exposed by the user that they have consented to. These mechanisms are all in place. There's challenge response protocols, there's the cryptography in place that can ensure that you give consent to somebody seeing some of your data before they can actually see it. And that's built into that system that there's not the all-powerful administrator other than perhaps at the underlying system level, okay, but the logical data structure, and there has no all-powerful owner, but it's all based on user consent and limited delegated administrative views of the data. So hopefully that helps.
So again, security you'd call it least privilege, and privacy you'd call it data minimization. There's newer things. It would be a whole other talk to talk about how you get to respectfulness in some new ways. Those are a little bit nascent. So we're sticking with reality right now. Thank you for the questions. Anyone else?
I had one question.
Yes.
You had IAM on the screen, and with the regular door locks, the digital door locks, the users are in full control. I don't think that would be good for a car. So who would be in full control of the actual keys?
Do you mean among consumers, or do you mean like manufacturer versus consumer?
Yeah.
Manufacturer. Right.
Well, the manufacturer, the insurance, who would be in control of the car and the key of the car in that sense?
So there's an old legal saying that property is a bundle of sticks. And you can own your house, but you don't have a right to make noise that's too loud after midnight or something, right? There's ways in which different property rights can be distributed. The question, I think, is how does it get distributed correctly? You're right, for like a door lock in your house, they've sort of given up, probably reluctantly, the rights to control it. I mean, I've got a smart home. It was built in 2017, and it was pre-wired. Every single window was pre-wired. And it's possible for things to go wrong, and I've experienced some of those things, right? So even if it was inadvertent on the manufacturer's part or the service's part, because it's a subscription service, right, to have a smart home and smart security. So the right answer might be different for each device, I guess.
Well, no, I was talking about you don't own the car. The bank owns the car.
A lien on the car. Yeah, that's even more complicated. It goes back much longer.
Right. So, no, I was just wondering when with the whole IAM system, is the vendors, the bank, and all of them involved in that?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So this
Yeah.
is like, who is really building these ecosystems of IT infrastructure? Is that what you're asking? Like, who's involved? Like,
Right.
insurance, for example, would be really definitely a third party, and they'd be a downstream third party, right? So now, could they make a request of the car manufacturer, or could the bank make a request of the car manufacturer? To me, that's a dystopia. I mean, let's not beat around the bush about it. But they do have a relationship. I'm going to advertise a talk I'm giving next month at Identiverse called Can Subsidiarity Save Decentralization? Because the problem is that power collects. So that has been a problem, has been a challenge that we have in our digitized industry for a long time. It continues to be a challenge. The consequences get higher. So I don't really have a good answer for you. I have a putative answer I'm essaying in a few weeks.
But I think it's less of a technical question, rather
It's
legal,
a business.
society.
It's basically a business relationships question. Yeah. The more you can obviously put it in technology, the better. But that's proven to be difficult. One last question? One last question.
I had a question about all these vehicle manufacturers moving towards connected vehicles, right? One of the things that a lot of the manufacturers are doing, they seem to just capitalize off of it. You had the term transparency in your slide. A lot of these vehicle manufacturers, they aren't very transparent, particularly when you look at their privacy policies. It's really just a misnomer. They're looking at it as a data harvesting collection site that the owner of that vehicle, even if you purchase it outright, that manufacturer should no longer have any ownership stake in it whatsoever. But they basically monetize the platform. So I guess my question to you is, are you aware of any manufacturers that actually honor transparency and offer consumers the ability to opt out of all this data collection and harvesting? Because
I have a German vehicle, and I will tell you that it allows me to opt out, and nothing stops working. Because they're basically extending GDPR protections to everybody. And we can't really name names, but we work with a lot of these major automotive OEMs. And some of the conversations I've had have been encouraging, let me say. Because with these big, societal forces are affecting the regulatory forces, right? There's more regulations, not just about privacy, but as I showed kind of in the orbit of privacy, there's consumer protection and AI and biometrics ethics and a whole host of things. It's all bearing down like a ton of bricks on everybody who touches
data. From the
data.
perspective that my older vehicle doesn't really have any privacy. Because it doesn't have anything to hide.
Because it's completely separate from you,
It's the data that I introduce to that vehicle or to that platform that's being monetized off of that platform.
It's like user-generated content.
So that does cause like PII concerns if you're buying a foreign vehicle. I'm having to share all my PII data with this, and it could be a foreign.
It is literally, like I was
entity.
mentioning, mycarmydata.eu. We're going to have to wrap up in a second, I think here. But mycarmydata.eu did a legal study that did a series of studies, and they proved out that all of that data is regulated as personal data. That is actually helpful to the consumer, the fact that it comes under that rubric. So, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the conference.